I got a friend named Alexis, look like a Buick.
Pat, Lori, Shelley, Aaliyah, Rose, Brian, Darren, and
Epiphany isn't just a name that black people give their daughters. It's a realization, and I just had one.
D-Nice.
Do you mean Denise?
Son of a bitch! You say your name right now.
Denise?
Say it right.
Denise.
Correctly.
Denise.
Right.
Denise.
Right.
D-Nice.
That's better. Thank you.
We can't pronounce her name, but we can tell you it has over 1,000 letters. We had to create a special graphic for her name. Take a look. That is her name. That makes Letitia LaShawn look simple. Letitia LaShawn Shante. Her birth certificate is 2 feet long. She has the longest personal name in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Record.
Jack Marius Tack-Theratrix, Michigan State University.
The Isaiah T. Billings Clive, Coastal Carolina University.
When I say Keisha and when I say Hannah, what pops up in your head? How many black girls named Molly or Becky do you personally know? What about Deja or Kiara? Do you remember when Daquan was a meme? Why are there so many black Washingtons and unique first names for black girls? As my name is Alexis, did my own mother name me after a car? In this video, I want to talk about a black American history of names. And how about we toast to that? Thankfully, Bright Cellars sent me a big box of wine to celebrate black names and history. Do you love a good wine but get a little overwhelmed remembering all of the names? Chardonnay, Chianti, Chablis, Cabernet, Champagne, and that's just the C's. Well, Bright Cellars wants to be your personal wine sommelier. They'll make it easy to indulge in premium and unique wines sourced from all over the world, suited to your tastes, of course. Usually, I'm a Chardonnay girl, but I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone and I am trying the Pinot Grigio. This is so good, okay? All right? I'm trying not to swallow this whole glass because I've still got work to do today, all right? Dang. Damn you, Bright Cellars. By the way, each box comes with cards to help you learn about each bottle. When you take their quick and very visually appealing quiz, they'll match you with the best picks. Over 3 million people have taken the quiz to be matched with new wines, and you can too. When you use the link in my bio or scan this QR code, you get 6 bottles of wine for just $55, and that's a $150 value. One of these babies can have your friend or loved one's name on it. Here's an idea. Start a wine club with your bestie and split the cost. You can skip or cancel your monthly subscription at any time. Scan the code or click the link below to get started. By many estimates, approximately 30 to 40% of the kidnapped people from Africa during the transatlantic slave trade were Muslim, meaning they likely had Arabic names. Those who were neither Muslim nor Christian had their own significant names from their own cultures. And when brought to America, the earliest enslaved people tried to keep their original or country names. But one of the simplest ways to dehumanize them and trample their spirits was by taking their names and giving them new ones. Most famously portrayed in the 1977 miniseries Roots.
Your name is Toby. You're going to learn to say your name. Let me hear you say it. What's your name?
Kunta Kinte.
If enslaved people got a last name and many didn't, it was the last name of the white people who owned them. Enslavers also took the word Sambo, which was originally a name for second son among Hausa people in West Africa, and turned it into a slur. During the colonial era, classical names like Virgil, Hannibal, Titus, Hercules, Phoebe, Venus, and Daphne were given to the enslaved. Those weren't routine names for white people. And noted art historian Susan Wegner, classical names could show off slaveholders' learning while also mocking those humans held as property by giving them ironic names of powerful ancient rulers, gods, and heroes. Venus was an especially popular name bestowed on black women and stemmed from a word meaning physical desire and sexual appetite. It was also, of course, the name for the Roman goddess of love and her Greek equivalent, Aphrodite. According to cultural anthropologist Sarah Abel, this reflected and licensed the lasciviousness of European slave owners towards African women, making such behavior sound agreeable. This late 18th century engraving, The Voyage of the Sable Venus from Angola to the West Indies by William Granger, depicts the fetishization of black women during the Middle Passage. Here's a side-by-side to the Botticelli Venus. As the years went by and the era of the Great Awakening peaked, enslaved people were given increasingly European and Christian names like Elijah and Moses. As with much of slavery, the conditions that people lived under varied by the enslaver. Some enslaved people were allowed to pick the name of their children, and others weren't. Early records from South Carolina, where Gullah Geechee culture thrived, showed distinctly African names and records, with groups naming their children after names of the week in West African languages, corresponding with birthday. According to Nick Butler, there were names like Quash for Sunday, Cujo for Monday, Bina for Tuesday, Kwame for Saturday, etc. It was common among black people to have nicknames for kin and friends, and runaway notices sometimes listed people's country names and nicknames. Added Butler in 1748, for example, an enslaver in Charleston advertised for the return of 2 Angola Negro men, one named Moses, but his country name Monvigo, the other named Samson, his country name Gomo. As black people won their freedom with blood, sweat, and tears by running away and becoming abolitionists, many changed their names to break away from their enslavers. Araminta Ross, referred to as Minty in runaway notices, became Harriet Tubman, taking the last name of her husband John during a time when enslaved marriages weren't recognized. Isabella Baumfree became Sojourner Truth. In 1838, escapee Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey had long dropped his 2 middle names already and been known as Frederick Stanley and Johnson. But in New Bedford, there were already too many Johnsons. Turning to the abolitionist he was staying with, I gave him the privilege of choosing me a name, but told him he must not take from me the name of Frederick. I must hold on to that to preserve a sense of my identity. Douglas was pulled from a Scottish poem. Still, during and after slavery, some black people took their former master's surnames or gave their children names inspired by American heroes like George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Abe Lincoln. But also, the 1880 census showed that 1/4 of black homes had a son named after their father. What were the most common first names for black people by the early 1900s that were barely used by white Americans? Abraham, Alonzo, Percy, Pearlie, Prince, Israel, Isaiah, Presley, Purcell, and Titus. According to the Ohio State University's Trevon Logan, these kinds of names had long been popular among the black population, with these names also listed commonly between 1719 and 1820 on ship manifests. In fact, 3% of enslaved people had names that were considered specifically black because white people didn't use them, and this percent would hold steady in the 1920s. As the 20th century went on, popular names for black men with specific European origins include Germain, of French and Latin, Darnell of the Anglos, Leroy of the Normans, and Tyrone of the Irish. You better call Tyrone. Sociologist Newbell Niles Puckett, author of Folk Beliefs of the Southern Negro, collected thousands of distinct black names from 1619 to the 1940s and 1975's posthumous Black Names in America. With a name like Newbell Niles Puckett, he was destined for the job, and he even created a list of unique names. Let me read some of my favorite girl names from the list. Some are familiar favorites, and some we may need to bring back. Alexina, Allegra, Angel Face, Asia, Banana, Beauty, Beauty Love, Beautiful Swindler, Beauty Marcel, Beauty Pearl, Blondie, Cinderella, Charlesetta, who I just know her daddy's name was Charles and her mama's name was Loretta. Choice, Cleopatra and Cleopatria, Doll Baby, Easter Bell, Elvira, Alexinia, Felicia, Future, Immaculate Conception, Ice Cream Babbitt, Hermione, Jetty. Jetty is like my favorite off that list. Jetty, come do these damn dishes. Jetty, bring me the remote. Hey Jetty, is we going outside this weekend? La Pearl, Lexi, Madonna, Pinky, a bunch of variations of Queen, and the list goes on. Surprisingly, Hannah was listed with 32 entries, making it far more popular than other names on the list. Make sure you check out the full list at the link in my description box and choose your favorite. Let me know in the comments. In case you're discounting the importance of black people's autonomy over their own names, consider Cassius Marcellus Clay becoming a Muslim man named Muhammad Ali. He was named after his father, who had been named after a Kentucky abolitionist and politician. Numerous white and black people objected to the name change and refused to refer to him as Muhammad Ali. "What's my name, Uncle Tom? What's my name?" Ali taunted one opponent between punches who still called him Clay. Ali's success, confidence, and religion, which would become contentious when he refused to be drafted for the Vietnam War, made him a pariah in the 1960s as much as the name change. He was derided as cocky and arrogant, and people intentionally used Cassius Clay to strip him of his autonomy and achievements. In the months of promotion for 1971's The Fight of the Century, Joe Frazier, a pro-war boxer, referred to Ali as Clay, which prompted Ali to call him an Uncle Tom and race traitor. He said, "Why does he insist on calling me Cassius Clay when even the worst of the white enemies recognize me as Muhammad Ali?" By the way, these men had beef basically for life, especially because Frazier beat him in the fight and Ali reneged on his promise to crawl across the ring and call Frazier the greatest. So Ali's name change was one of the most visible and debated ones, but in the 60s and 70s, lots of black people in the wake of Afrocentrism and the civil rights and black power movements were changing their names. Malcolm Little had become Malcolm X back in the 40s, with the X symbolizing his unknown African surname. Black Panther and future best-selling musician Yvette Marie Stevens became Shaka when she was 13, after the name was bestowed upon her by a Yoruba priest. Stokely Carmichael became Kwame Ture, though he went by both names by the end of his life. Future politician Frizzell Gerard Tate became Kwasi Mfume. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was born Lou Alcindor, publicly began using his new name in 1971 after he converted to Islam, like Muhammad. By the way, I find it very interesting that Bill Cosby and Muhammad Ali were great friends, but in Cosby's infamous 2004 pound cake speech given before the NAACP to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, he said, "We are not Africans. Those people are not Africans. They don't know a damn thing about Africa. With names like Shaniqua, Shaligwa, Muhammad, and all that crap, and all of them are in jail. When we give these kinds of names to our children, we give them the strength and inspiration and the meaning of those names. What's the point of giving them strong names if there's not parenting and values backing it up?" On one hand, he insinuated the names were powerful, but perhaps only after he realized he had slipped up and equated Shaniqua and Shaligwa, obvious targets for his speech about respectability politics, with Muhammad, the ancient Arabic and Islamic name of one of his friends. So anyways, the slew of name changes among 1960s celebrities, activists, and intellectuals caused given names to change. Prior to this period, naming pattern differences between white and black people were small, around the aforementioned 3%. By 1977, the average black female got a name that was 20 times more likely to be given to black girls than white ones. Popular ones included Aaliyah, Asada, and Afeni. A North Carolina native and Black Panther named Alice Williams became Afeni Shakur, and in 1972, she changed her one-year-old's name from Lesane Parish Crooks to Tupac Amaru Shakur, after an 18th century indigenous Incan leader who led the 1780 rebellion against the Spanish in Peru. Afeni would later say about the new name of the future best-selling rapper, "I wanted him to have the name of revolutionary indigenous people in the world. I wanted him to know he was part of a world culture and not just from a neighborhood." Names with La, like LaShonda and Lakeisha, became common from this period too. In the early 90s, there was news coverage on unique black names as the Shah prefix became popular with names like Shamika and Shaniqua. The name Shanae conjured up images of Martin Lawrence in drag.
"Little girl, just go home and change your pampers, okay?"
Little girl, look, don't get hurt by this little girl, okay?
No, you didn't.
Yes,
No,
I
you,
did.
bitch, don't you put your hand in my face. All right? You don't put your hand in my face. I will hurt you, okay? I will hurt you. So what you trying to do?
For boys, there were Quantaviuses and Ladariuses, complained a Florida college professor to the Tampa Bay Times in 1993. It's a class thing. The middle class doesn't have a need to bless their child with such names. Younger teenage girls are trying to make their child unique. She wants her to be unique, so she gives her a name the child can't spell until she's 13 and nobody can pronounce. Agree to columnists, they are prevalent in the ghetto. If giving yourself an African-sounding name is supposed to inspire pride, we certainly know enough black kids with exotic-sounding names who are part of the crime statistics. I think that I can overcome the stereotype of a name if you get to know me, but we are not always given a fair shot. A Muslim name after the bombing of the World Trade Center is certainly not a plus. Warned University of Florida's Black Studies Director Dr. William Simmons, blacks will go further back with those kinds of names. There was a small bump in the amount of black people choosing distinctly white names in the late 1990s and 2000s. But creative names, particularly for black girls, was and is a continuing trend. In 2004, Roland G. Fryer and Stephen D. Levitt found that in California alone, nearly 1/3 of African-American girls were given a name given to nobody else in the state. They found that having a creative name was only more likely to make a black woman give her own children creative names. So all of the Ivanas and Flo's and Icy's, more of my favorite names from that early to mid 20th century Puckett list, would go on to create names with similar flair and creativity. And sometimes, did those names go too far?
What is her name? What is her name?
It's Rose Shandy, Antonishan, Vision, Keeson, Simon, Drew, Shalinda, Shirkane, Ronquel, Ninja, Shamika, Shanet, Tamika, Shawahini, Bianca, Kani, Satsan, Janish, Marine, Consai, Kirkanisha, Devon, Yvonne, Lutani, Sivan, Tay, Pranky, Salaviva, Zamfisa, Jesslyn, Sajave, Loya, Vet, Sparkly, Sandra, Kate, Kati, Vishon, Orly, Vakashawa, Willis, and Nathan, Shots, Macmone, Lois, my middle name is Kunyan Scott.
Your middle name?
Okay, so some names went too far, but more often than not, I love a good creative black name. I still remember the pride on my coworker's mom's face in high school when she told me why she named her son Sir Christopher, because white people would always be forced to call him Sir. She did that. And I'm so sorry, but my own mother is very iconic for naming me Alexis Jonday, because how else would I be lectual and have intellectual media? Is Jonday a backwards portmanteau of one of her dogs and a mustard? Yes. Is it uniquely mine? Also yes. She almost named me Cleopatra or India, by the way. Can you imagine if this was Cleopatra Media or India Media? No, intellectual media. It was her best friend at the time who suggested Lexus when the cars were really popular. But she said there weren't enough syllables, so she said Alexis. When the nurse, a rude woman in a rush, wrote my name down and presumed to know the spelling, my mother told her, no, it's an E at the front. The nurse had the last laugh though, because she left the acui my mother requested off of Jonday. And that's why people say like Giondi instead of Jonday. I bet you ain't know that's how my name was said. I bet you. Speaking of pronunciations, remember when 9-year-old Quvenzhane Wallis corrected Ricky Gervais for mispronouncing her name and Chrissy Teigen made fun of her?
This is how you say my name. Quvenzhane Wallis.
Yeah, that happened. This reminds me of someone else with a truly iconic and singular black name, Beyonce Knowles. Miss Tina, born Celestine, christened B after her own maiden French Creole name, Beyonce. Miss Tina's surname was misspelled on the birth certificate by the nurse, making hers different from her siblings, whose surname was Beyonce. Miss Tina explained to Elle magazine that she asked her mother, why didn't you argue and make them correct it? And she said she did the first time and was told, be happy that you're getting a birth certificate, because at one time, black people didn't get birth certificates because it meant that you really didn't exist and you weren't important. This is how important our names are. And by the way, that's how we ended up with Beyonce, which now means beyond others. Over 1,000 Beyoncés alone were born between 2000 and 2004 when Destiny's Child peaked and she first went solo. And having that name is a lot to live up to. I imagine it's like when people name their kids Jesus or something. Like, why would you name me that? I'm scared to live. You know the joke, I'm gonna call him what his mama called him? This only applies for me to Twitter. I'll never call it X. Elon Musk can choke. But when it comes to humans, plenty of people go by chosen names. Think of Bell Hooks, born Gloria Jean Watkins. She chose to write under the name of her great-grandmother and intentionally used lowercase letters because the substance of books, not who she is, was more important. When Anna Mae Bullock became superstar Tina Turner and divorced her abusive husband Ike, all she asked for was the rights to her name. The surname of her abuser became a worldwide brand on her terms. For years, people have incorrectly assumed Whoopi Goldberg, born Karen Elaine Johnson, is Jewish because of the surname she chose. Chosen names are also, of course, important to black gender non-conforming people. Activist Activist Marsha P Johnson, who was given their father's name at birth, chose Johnson from Howard Johnson's restaurant, and P for Pay It No Mind in reference to their gender. Janet Mock chose her name after being inspired by Janet Jackson. Her given surname, like so many others, came from her third great-grandfather, who was owned by a white family named Mock. Laverne Cox's middle name was originally Laverne, a name that appeared on Newbell Niles Puckett's list of unique black names for girls. And lastly, we can't forget about all the Junebugs, Squirts, Man-Mans, Juniors, and other nicknames for family members who we don't refer to as anything else. I didn't know my Aunt Lady's real name was Melissa until I was a teenager. I was at the cookout like, who the fuck is Melissa? Two of my grandfather's brothers changed their names when they moved from the South to the North, and I never knew they had given names until recently when talking to my grandfather for this video. His own father was given the two-letter name DJ, which didn't stand for anything, and one of his sons became DJ Jr., which he changed. The rise of Barack Hussein Obama in the national spotlight in the 2000s is crucial for a bunch of reasons we'll get into in the future. But for the purpose of this video, do you remember the jokes about his name? It was a component of the racism and Islamophobia hurled at Obama during a decade in the aftermath of 9/11 and a conservative presidency.
Ultimately, though, tonight's not about the disagreements Governor Romney and I may have. It's what we have in common, beginning with our unusual names. Actually, Mitt is his middle name. I wish I could use my middle name.
His race and name were both barriers, and later touted as signs of the country's new liberalism. A black man with an ethnic name had the launch codes at the helm of imperialism. Child, we made it. Levitt and Fryer's research in 2004 found that creative names didn't have a significant impact on someone's quality of life, using the data of 16 million births in California between 1961 and 2000. They also found that unique names were more common among the lower class, but not that these names contributed to them being lower class. Argued Fryer, it's not really that you're named Kaisha that matters, it's that you live in a community where you're likely to get that name that matters. At the same time, a conflicting study in Chicago entitled, "Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal?" responded to 1,300 classified ads with dummy resumes, finding black-sounding names were 50% less likely to get a callback than white-sounding names with comparable resumes. The study concluded applicants with white names need to send about 10 resumes to get one callback, whereas applicants with African-American names need to send about 15 resumes to achieve the same result. The sample size, method, and location no doubt impacted the different findings, but as time has gone by, the idea that black names are discriminated against has increased. In the wake of the Great Recession, the New York Times reported in 2009 that black people were trying to whiten their resume to find employment by dropping or altering names that were distinctly black. In a 2015 study at UCLA featuring 1,500 participants, the names Jamal, Deshaun, and Darnell were pitted against Connor, Wyatt, and Garrett to test for bias. Summed up one of the research scientists, "I've never been so disgusted by my own data." The amount that our study participants assumed based only on a name was remarkable. A character with a black-sounding name was assumed to be physically larger, more prone to aggression, and lower in status than a character with a white-sounding name. The University of Chicago and the University of California, Berkeley did a study that was published in 2021. They submitted over 83,000 entry-level job applications to 108 Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. and found that people with black names had a 2.1% less chance of getting contacted. But you know what makes all of this data even more interesting? Trevon Logan, Lisa Cook, and John Parman, studying death records of 3 million black men from 4 states, found that those with distinctly black names lived nearly 1 year longer on average than other black Americans. They wrote, "The results show that having an African American name increases the lifespan by more than 3 years in Alabama, 2 years in Illinois, and more than 7 years in Missouri, and nearly 4 years in North Carolina," leaving them to conclude that there are likely several pieces of the African American demographic experience which remain hidden from contemporary scholarship and which require serious and sustained investigation. What will we know about the Black experience and names in the future? In the present era, distinctly Black names are much more widely accepted than ever before, but there still seems to be lingering discrimination. And like everything else, they're wrapped up in our culture and history and society's trends. If my theory that Black conservatism is on the rise for the rest of the decade is true, does that mean that'll impact Black names? Will it lead to more Black names or less Black names? Do you have an interesting name, by the way? Has your name ever impacted your ability to get a job or led to racism? And what's your favorite Black celebrity name change? Also, do you think that in the future we'll look back and see the name Karen take a permanent nosedive in naming popularity among Black and even white people? I'm willing to bet yes and come back to this video in 10 years. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you like this video and subscribe. Thanks again to Bright Sellers for sponsoring.